Hi everyone, in this video, Haojun and I will be presenting our work on constructing effective responses to conversational agent abuse. Agent abuse is quite prevalent in open domain conversational agents. Our experiences as part of the Stanford's 2019 Alexa Prize team confirmed this. More than 10% of our conversations contain some level of user offense. Prior work demonstrates several response strategies used by conversational agents to respond to offensive user remarks. The most common strategy used by commercial agents is the avoidance strategy, where the agents avoid directly responding. Instead, they use a generic phrase, such as, "I'd rather not talk about that." It is shown that empathetic responses are good at reducing repeat offenses. In this type of response, the agent acknowledges the user's frustration. An example of this is, "I understand why you said that. I'm sorry to disappoint, but I can't talk about that." However, prior work has some limitations. Most experiments were conducted in controlled lab settings or by crowd workers, neither of which are representative of how self-volunteered users interact with conversational agents in real-life settings. We tackle this by running our experiments as part of our Alexa Prize chatbot. Another drawback of the prior work was that the multi-turn strategies were not studied. We study a multi-turn strategy, redirection, in our work and report our findings. Here's how the beginning and the end of the conversation with our Alexa Prize competition bot looks like. Alexa users could initiate the competition bots by saying, "Alexa, let's chat," after which Alexa would randomly hand over the conversation to one of the competition bots. This is how we were able to get real users talk to our agent. We hypothesized that when responding to an offensive user remark, following could be useful in reducing the user offensiveness. First, using an explicit redirection. This way, the user's attention can be moved away from the offense and the conversation can continue in a less negative direction. Second, using the user's voluntarily provided names when responding. This can cause the user to be more receptive to the agent's ask to not engage in an offensive dialogue. Third, asking the user why they have made an offensive remark. This can invite the users to reflect on their remarks. Fourth, finally, using responses that are empathetic or counter to the user utterance. Here are a few examples of how we put together our different hypotheses. Specifically, we treated each of our hypotheses as an add-on piece and tried several different combinations. Here you can see that the response fragments that correspond to each hypothesis we had. For example, in the avoidance name redirect strategy on the first row, we have first used an avoidance sentence. "I'd rather not talk about that." Then use the name of the user, Peter, and finally used a redirect sentence. "So who's your favorite musician?" Following the redirect sentence, we hope that the users would accept the new direction we propose and continue the conversation on a more positive note, instead of fixating on the offensive remark. Similarly, on the second row, we have combined our why hypothesis with the name hypothesis and came up with the response, "Why did you say that, Peter?" The third and the fourth rows show examples of the counter redirect and empathetic redirect responses. An example for the first one is, "That is a very suggestive thing to say. I don't think we should be talking about that." With the redirect portion, "Let's move on. So who's your favorite musician?" Similarly, example for the latter one can be, "If I could talk about it, I would, but I really can't. Sorry to disappoint." With the same redirect portion. So who's your favorite musician? Prior work either used self-reported scales of emotions by non-anonymous volunteers, perceived quality of the conversation from crowd workers, or user ratings at the end of an entire conversation. These metrics don't directly measure the impact of the strategies. To address this, we conducted a large-scale study to quantitatively measure the effectiveness of response strategies using the following three metrics. The re-offense ratio, which measures the ratio of the offensive conversations where the user made another offensive remark to all the offensive conversations using a particular strategy. And our second metric measures the length of the conversation after the initial response, given that there are no further offenses. And our last metric, next, measures the length of the conversation until the next offense, assuming there are subsequent offenses. These automatic metrics were needed because we had to come up with a quick way to process the many conversations we have gathered from the real users. Now I will hand off to Haojun, who will summarize our findings.
From our experiments, we found that strategies with redirection perform significantly better than strategies without redirections. In the best case, we are able to reduce reoffense ratio from as high as 93.8% to as low as 40.6%, controlling other factors. We further tested the redirect hypothesis by comparing the strategies highlighted in dark red and strategies highlighted in bright red. We see a statistically significant reduction in reoffense ratio in both pairwise comparisons, with odds ratio p-value less than 0.005. We tested our name hypothesis by comparing the strategies with or without the name, controlling other factors. We found that using users' names are not effective at reducing reoffenses by themselves, but we were able to find a 6% statistically significant reduction in reoffense ratio when using a name in conjunction with a redirect. We tested our Y hypothesis by controlling the name factor as highlighted in dark red and light brown. To our surprise, we observed a 3% statistically significant increase when we used the Y strategy as opposed to a simple avoidance, which showed that users almost always double down on their offense instead of providing an honest answer. Finally, we tested our empathetic and counter hypothesis by comparing the avoidance plus redirect strategy in bright red against the empathetic and counter strategies highlighted in dark red and light brown. We have shown a statistically significant 3% reduction in reoffense ratio when using an empathetic response in place of a simple avoidance response, validating the findings by prior studies. We also found that using a redirect significantly delays user reoffense by as much as 7.6 turns on average with large effect sizes. We also observed that without a redirection, user almost always reoffend immediately. We were unable to find similar statistical evidence for the other pairwise comparisons. We're also interested in learning more about why users stop their offense. We found that without a redirection, users stop their abuse by stopping the conversation immediately. However, we see that strategies with redirection significantly prolonged a non-offensive conversation. Our pairwise statistical tests of the hypothesis highlighted in dark and bright red again, shown an increase of as much as 15 turns on average, with medium to large effect sizes. We also found a significant 2.8 turns increase on average when using users' names together with a generic avoidance response and a redirect, though the effect sizes are small. We're unable to find any statistically significant differences between other pairs of strategies tested. In conclusion, we found that it is more effective for the agent to actively redirect the user to a different topic, to never ask the user why they offended, to use the user's names whenever possible together with a redirection, and to use empathetic responses whenever possible. However, despite the empirical effectiveness of redirections and empathetic strategies, we would like to remind researchers of the societal dangers of adopting such strategies. Extensive use of these strategies could further gender stereotypes that female agents will only passively avoid offensiveness, since most dialogue agents have a default female voice. It may also cause the user to believe that their offensiveness will go unnoticed in the real world as well. We urge industry practitioners to consider the greater impact of deploying such strategies in voice-based dialogue agents beyond the proposed effectiveness metrics. Thank you so much.